Parshas Teruma. This week's Parsha discusses a fundraising campaign for the Mishkan, for the tabernacle. The campaign wasn't simply for money, it was for material as well, all kinds of material. We have Zahav, Chesed, Unachoshes, we have gold, silver, and copper, and we have Tcheles, Vargamon, V'Talashani, V'Sheish, and we have different types of dyed materials and hides and wood and all kinds of necessities, both the materials themselves and what they could purchase, and the money with which we could purchase. So the Torah begins as follows. The opening verse is one that's common to us. We're on Chaf Aleph, that's 25, chapter 25, verse 1. Introductory, Hashem speaks to Moshe saying, Daber el b'nei Yisrael, speak to the children of Israel, v'yikhu li, and they will take for me, teruma, a contribution. It's the word from the word rum, to raise up or to separate. So this is a what might be called an adava, a contribution. Me'es kol ish asher yidvenu libo, from every man whose lave, it's frequently translated as heart, sometimes as mind. In this case, it's kind of a combination of both. It's yidvenu libo, that his will causes him to want to contribute. Tikhu es trumasi, take my truma. It seems to be a little redundant, right? And then the next, well, what's the redundancy? It says, v'yikhu li truma, they will take from me a truma. Me'es kol ish asher yidvenu libo, from every man whose will causes him to give, he's good-natured and wants to give. Tikhu es trumasi. Why does it just say, v'yikhu li truma, me'es kol ish asher yidvenu libo? And then the next verse says, that was Beis, that was verse 2. The next one says, V'zos ha-truma asher tikhu meitam, and this is the truma that you should take. The word teruma shows up 3 times. It seems to be unnecessary. So if you look at Rashi, Rashi says, Tikhu es trumasi, Amar Rabbeinu, this word truma shows up 3 times. So Rashi says, our rabbis say, Shalosh terumos amuroskan. There are 3 contributions that are mentioned here. Achas truma bekala golgoles shenasu mehema adonim. One of them is the coin per person. We see this shows up explicitly in Parshas Pekudei, but it's bekala golgoles. It's this coin, machzis a shekel, half a shekel. That is for every individual, every head, every skull. In other words, it's a precise amount. In next week's Parsha, it says that everybody gives a machzis hashekel. It says, Hashir lo yarbev, adol lo yamit, can't give more. When it comes to the contribution that's mandated of half a shekel, you can't give more. You can't give, I'm going to give a full shekel. I'm going to give 20 shekels. Can't do that. It has to be precise. And then it says, va'achas trumas hamizbeach, and one of them, the second, is the contribution for the mizbeach, which means contributing money, funds, so that the mikdash, the operation of either the Mishkan or the Beis Mikdash, can acquire the animals and the other material that's necessary to put together and to offer the korbanos, the offerings. So that's bekala gugoles, the kupos, liknos mehen korbanos tzibur. So those are the also fixed amount that is to buy the offerings that are given by the community. In other words, they're private offerings, korban yochid. They're the individual who is going to buy them, who's going to bring them, buys them. But when it comes to communal offerings, the community has to pay. How does the community get the money? From the, in a sense, it's a tax, and it's a precise amount. And again, you can't do more, can't do less. Va'achas trumas hamishkan, and the third teruma that is alluded to here with the use of the word truma is for purchasing the materials for the Mishkan. And that's nidvas kol echad shehisnadvu. And that is the contribution of each one who contributes voluntarily. So you have mandatory, and that's a precise amount. And then you have voluntary, which is as much or as little as a person wants. That's the Rashi's explanation for why the word truma shows up in a way that would otherwise appear to be unnecessary. Now, the Vilna Gaon says, when we read this, we should read it as follows. Daber el b'nei Yisrael, speak to the children of Israel, v'yikhu li truma me'es kol ish asher yidvenu libo, and take from me an offering, in this case, offering in the sense of a contribution, from every man whose heart volunteers, And then he says, doesn't say it quite this way, but he says that, and what that expression of volunteer is, it could be signaled by quotation marks. Tikhu es trumasi. This is as if the contributor were speaking. Ashed venu libo, that his heart says, as it were, Tikhu trumasi, take my contribution. And we know that eventually that there was more than enough that was contributed. So that's how the Vilna Gaon reads the verse. But what we see here is an interesting distinction. Two of the trumos have a precise amount that you couldn't give more, you couldn't give less. And then one of the trumos is without limit, up or down. And it appears that there are certain mitzvos that have precise measure, and there are other mitzvos that have no measure. And this, in fact, is reflected in the first Mishnah of Mishnayos Pe'ah. In that Mishnah, it says, Elu devarim she'en lahem shiur. These are things, meaning mitzvos, important things, that have no required measure. Hapeah, leaving the corner of the field for the poor person. You can leave as much or as little as you like. Vahabikurim, and first fruits, likewise. Vahareayon, and the appearance at the Beis HaMikdash. There's a minimum appearance of once at each of the holidays. They're called Shalosh Regalim, and the that every male has to show up in the Beis HaMikdash. But it doesn't say, first of all, how long he has to stay. There's different opinions about what the lack of measure is about. Perhaps how much he spends on an offering, on the Olas Re'iyah, and perhaps on the Shlamim that he brings, and different types of offerings. And also a person can come to the Beis HaMikdash when it's not the holidays as well. So there's flexibility there. Ugumilus chasadim, and performing acts of loving kindness. There is no minimum shear, there's no minimum amount. And Talmud Torah, and the study of Torah. A person can learn as much or as little Torah as he likes, and he has learned Torah. Each of these requires fuller explanation, but the bottom line is there's certain things that have precise measure, and there are other things in the Torah which there's a category of good, but there is no minimum or maximum measure of the good that you perform. You could say that there's a minimum, but the minimum is just a mashahu. In fact, it's something that many rabbis don't like to publicize, but as far as there's an obligation to learn Torah in the morning and night. But if a person says one verse of Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, so he has learned Torah, and if he says that in the morning and says that at night, he's fulfilled his obligation to learn Torah. The strong preference is that he learn more, and there's an obligation to learn whenever you can, but there's no set amount. Now this is interesting. So you have, even within Teruma itself, you have precise amounts that must be given, and then you have more flexible standards for the giving for the Mishkan. And it seems that within the Torah perspective, there's a notion of a structure that you can't deviate from. That's the precise amounts. And then you have the amount, the place where there is no measure. That's where the creativity comes in. Because you'll notice, if you spend your entire day doing one of these things that has no shiur, then you're not doing the other. So if you're learning constantly, you're not doing gemilus chasodim and performing acts of loving kindness. And a person could be running around from pillar to post, performing acts of loving kindness and never learning Torah. So what's the mix? What's the right mix? That's up to the individual. Kol asher yidvenu libo. And that is, in a sense, the stuff of life, is reconciling competing priorities. I want to do chesed. I want to learn Torah. I want to do other things that are all good. But if I do one, I can't do the other. What is the proper mix? That is something that a person needs to really think about, consult with advisors, do his own learning, feel what's right for him, and also respond to the exigencies of the time. If he has a friend who is ill, then he should call him. If it means he's not going to learn, well, okay. If learning is a priority, and it ought to be, do what you need to do in order to visit your friend, or call your friend who's sick, or get involved in organizational life. There's always competition for our time. And that's the one thing that is fixed and set for everybody. Everyone only has 24 hours in a day. And how we spend that time is up to us. We are the balabas. We are the boss, if you will, of how we spend our time. And we have guidelines. There are certain things that we must do, and there are other things that we have the freedom to do. But ultimately, our calling is to fill our lives with things that are of value. And that is Kol asher yidvenu libo, me'es kol asher yidvenu libo tikhos trumasi. Whoever is generous of spirit should give, and that's from whom you take the truma. That's from whom you take the voluntary contribution, whether it's money or it's time, other kinds of resources, connections, contacts, etc. Whatever the situation calls for, you're the balabas, you're the owner of your time. You make the call based on whatever guidelines the Torah gives us, and you do the mix and you perform the mitzvah. Have a good Shabbos.